I thought today was going to be, a little frog in my throat there to start. I thought today was going to be all talking about football, talking about the bowl game. The bowl game announcement coming yesterday. Pitt's going to be playing in the Military Bowl in Annapolis, Maryland at the Navy Stadium on the 27th, the Saturday after Christmas. They're going to be taking on East Carolina in a game with a chance to get to 9 wins. And I thought we'd talk about that today, break down the matchup, and talk about going back to the Military Bowl for the first time in 10 years and what that all means. And there's been some strong reaction to it, so I thought we'd kind of take on some of the main points of why people like or don't like this bowl assignment for Pitt. Thought there was some interesting conversation to have. And best of all, I wouldn't have to change the slideshow. We got our football photos up. We could keep our football photos up to talk about Pitt playing East Carolina to finish the 2025 season. I thought that's what we would do. But along the way, something kind of went wrong and threw a wrench in the gears. And that something, of course, was Pitt losing to Hofstra last night at the Peterson Event Center. 80-73 final score for Pitt, losing a game, another mid-major loss for Jeff Capel, his 9th since he became the head coach of Pitt, the second one this season after they lost to Quinnipiac. And a game where it's troubling, to say the least. And there was there was a lot that happened in that game. But you come to this point now where Pitt is 5-5, 10 games into the season. They're losing to Hofstra in a game that, ends up being a 7-point game, but wasn't really all that close. 80-73 was the final. Hofstra was winning by 13 at halftime, but it didn't even feel that close. It felt like Hofstra dominated the first half, and they did. And then in the second half, it was closer. Pitt actually outscored Hofstra 50-44, largely thanks to Brandon Cummings, who had 30 points in the second half alone. Pitt shot 59% from the floor in the second half. But they couldn't do anything defensively. Like, they could not stop Hofstra. Hofstra had a really good guard, Cruz Davis. He scored 36 in that game. It's the most since Chucky Hepburn had 37 for Louisville against Pitt last March. They couldn't stop him. Whatever he wanted to do, he got. And they had to have known that going into the game. They had to have known Cruz Davis is a really good player, and he was going to give them fits. And they had to be prepared for it. They had to have, another team has a really good player. You know who that player is, and you prepare to stop that player. And I can only assume they talked about this before the game. I can only assume they practiced for it before the game, but they certainly didn't look like they had any idea what they were doing throughout the game. And when there were adjustments made, and I think there were some adjustments, Hofstra had perfect counter punches, and they were, and then when adjustments were made to the adjustments, Hofstra, again, was ahead of them. They got run out of their own gym. In a game against a mid-major opponent. A bye game, as John Rothstein would say, epitome of brutality or whatever. They got run out of their own gym in a bye game. And so we can't quite talk about the Military Bowl today because we've got to talk about Pitt Hofstra. Some of my biggest concerns, some of the things that I'm worried about the most with this team, from on the court and off the court, and where they're going to go from here. We're going to hear from Jeff Capel a little bit. I've got a few things that he said after the game last night to bring that into the conversation as well, because I want you to hear from him and we can talk about that. Let's try and figure out partially what happened last night and partially where the heck this team goes from here, because it's feeling pretty bleak right now on a lot of fronts. So let's talk a little Pitt basketball. Not exactly a cheery way to start the Monday morning, but I guess we've all got a case of the Mondays after you lose the Hofstra, right? All right, Pitt basketball, Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, let's talk about this game. Pitt loses to Hofstra. Hofstra 80-73 is the final score. Cruz Davis, 36 points and 7 assists. It was, so he scored 14 field goals and handed out 7 assists. Hofstra scored 29 field goals. 21 of them were either scored by or assisted by Cruz Davis. That's how good he was. Just an outstanding performance from him. Brandon Cummings not too far off the pace there, 34 points, attempted 10 fewer field goals than Cruz Davis. Cruz Davis had 36 points on 25 attempts Brandon Cummings had 34 points on 15 attempts. He made 10 field goals and he had 5 assists. So Pitt scored 22 baskets. Brandon Cummings either, he scored or assisted on 15 of those 22. So pretty big impact from Brandon Cummings. And quite frankly, I mean, like, we could do a whole episode just about Brandon Cummings and how important it was for him to have a breakout game. He had a good start to the season. He had 18 and 19 in the first 2 games, but then, injury crept up, cost him 1 game, and he just hasn't been right since then. He's missed, I think, 3 games so far this year, and it seems like he finally was sort of feeling himself again, and he was doing sort of all the things that are the best Brandon Cummings things. You know what I mean? He was pulling the trigger when he got a little bit of space to shoot. He was picking and choosing. Sorry, I don't mean to hit the P sounds too loud on the microphone. He was picking and choosing when he would drive. I don't think that's really going to be a strength of his, like taking guys off the dribble. He really couldn't get past Cruz Davis last night. But he was picking and choosing when he would drive and pulling up, but he was also getting to the free throw line. And I think that's the thing for Brandon Cummings is if he's going to put the ball on the floor and try to drive or take his man off the dribble or get into the paint, I think it's going to be tough for him. I think it's going to be tough for him to finish, but he can still make the opponent pay by going to the foul line. And he did. And he shot 9 of 9 from the free throw line last night. So outstanding game for Brandon Cummings, something they very much need. It was a huge performance. They need him to do that. But it gets overshadowed by the fact that it happened in a loss to Hofstra. And we can talk about, wow, it's big for them to have Brandon Cummings coming on. He's going to be, an important part of this team. And, if they can get him going, boy, they can really do this and they can do that. But they've got bigger problems than that. They've got bigger problems than like, oh, they finally got that other scorer to develop. I've been trying to put together an article on Barry Dunning Jr. And just didn't get a chance to do it late last week because of signing day and everything. And, I had some really good quotes from Jeff Capel. The Texas A&M coach talked about him, said some really nice stuff. Barry Dunning had some good quotes. He's been playing really well, and it's an important development for this team. And in any normal scenario where they don't lose to Quinnipiac and Hofstra, and instead of being 5-5 right now, they're 8-2, where they've lost to West Virginia and Texas A&M, and you're not happy because they've lost all their power, high major opponents, but at least they're not blowing games, or it wouldn't just be it wouldn't be 8-2. It'd be 7-3. But ideally, you'd be in this situation where, we could talk about, okay, well, they're 7-3. It's not a great spot to be after 10 games, but they're going to keep pushing. And boy, if you can get these scoring options to emerge, Barry Dunning Jr. keeps playing well. Now you've got Brandon Cummings coming on. You're not going to have to rely on Cam Corrin for the scoring. And DeMarco Minor doesn't need to be a scorer. He can just set guys up, although he didn't really even do that last night. He had 2 assists, no turnovers, so that's good, but only 2 assists and 7 points. But, that would be the normal kind of thing to be talking about, the emergence of Dunning Jr. and Cummings as scorers, and how that's going to help this team going forward, and how it can shift the dynamics of how they play, and maybe change the outlook as you move closer to ACC play. That's the kind of thing we'd be talking about. But the fact that they've now lost twice to mid-major teams, and lost in rather spectacular fashion, they got kind of run out of their own gym twice. Once by Quinnipiac, and once in this game last night by Hofstra. And the Hofstra game, I would say, was even worse. I think Hofstra's better than Quinnipiac, and they showed it because they were better than Pitt. Cruz Davis was better than anybody on Pitt's roster. And he transferred from St. John's to Hofstra 2 years ago. But I just couldn't help but sit there and think. I mean, it's not a perfect comparison because his transfer was 2 years ago. But I just couldn't help but sit there and think, who would you rather have on this roster? Cruz Davis or DeMarco Minor? And that's no disrespect to DeMarco Minor, but damn, Hofstra went out and got the guy. Hofstra went out and got a dude who, he came into this game averaging 17 or 18 points per game. He had 17 against UCF, drops 36 last night. And Cruz Davis could do whatever he wanted in that game last night. It's partially about Pitt's poor defense, but partially because he's really good. If he wanted to take guys off the dribble, if he wanted to drive, he did. And he was, see if I find my notes where I wrote it down. 8 of 11 on layups. So when he drove, he scored 8 out of 11. If he wanted to pull up from 3, if he had space beyond the arc and he wanted to pull up, okay. He was 5 of 11 from 3. He was 1 of 3 on like mid-range jumpers, but if you could drive and finish as well as he could and shoot threes as well as he could, I mean, the only real blemish in his game is he was 3 of 5 from the free throw line. And his 2 misses were like late in the game. But otherwise, he was unstoppable. And there was nothing Pitt could do about it. And, he might have been faster than all Pitt's guys, Pitt's defenders. But he's still, you have to be able to figure out how to defend. You have to be able to have a plan. You have to be able to execute it. You have to be able to coach it up. You have to be able to communicate it, and you have to be able to execute it. And none of those things were happening last night. None of those things. And, Jeff Capel kind of said it. And I want you to hear from Jeff Capel. I have some thoughts about what he says here, and I want you to hear it from him. Because we're reaching a new level of concern and possibly despair here. So this is what Jeff Capel said. He sat down and started his press conference last night after the game. So, first of all, congrats to Hofstra. They're a really good team. His normal sort of thing that he said at the beginning. They're a really good team. Cruz Davis is great. And then he gets to this part where he talks about his team. And I want you to listen to this and listen to the first question and how he answers that. And listen to this. This is Jeff Capel from last night's postgame show.
I'm really disappointed in us, and this is not taking anything away from them, but we didn't play with the necessary force that's required to be good on either side of the ball. It manifested itself in both ways, with our inability to keep the ball in front of us, not getting into the ball against their ball screen coverages, against their ball screen actions, I should say, which I thought led to us being really poor offensively in the first half. And that's on me. I have to do a better job. I'm not doing a good job. What I'm saying, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to work on is not resonating. And that starts with me, because this is a pattern of people getting in our paint, scoring in our paint, not being able to guard the basketball one-on-one. And when we don't do that, it usually leads to us not being good offensively, which we were not in the first half. We were better offensively in the second half, played with a little bit more force. We did some good things during that run, and I think we got it to 3 at one point, but then right away they go on a 7-0 run. We give up a straight line drive to Cruz, who gets an and one, and then we give up a couple of offensive rebounds where they score. And so the physical and mental stamina that it requires to be a good team, we don't have that right now. And that's something that we have to continue to work on, continue to try to develop, and hopefully at some point we get it.
You talk about the message maybe not resonating with the team. I mean, what can you do to maybe fix that, get that to resonate?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I have to really think about it. We have some time before we play again. We'll go into exams starting tomorrow. But I have to figure something out. I have to figure something out, because what we're doing is not working. This team for the game shot 52% from the floor against us. If you look at both halves today and then the second half against Texas A&M, that's 3 halves in a row where a team has shot 50% or better. You're not going to win games like that. And so we have to do a better job on that side of the basketball. From the beginning, from the time this team got together, that's what we talked about, where we wanted to hang our hat. And we've shown at times that we can do it, but it's gotta be who we are. And we have to understand the importance of it all the time. That's what we have to do to give ourselves a chance to win. If we do that at the level that we need to do it, that we have to do it, then we'll have a chance to win. If we don't, we can lose to anyone. And this game's another example of that. But I have to think, it's a long-winded answer, but I have to think about that, figure out something different, because what I'm doing is not working.
Sorry, I said that was from last night's post-game show. It was from last night's post-game press conference, but you get the gist. I have to think about that, because I have to figure something out different, because what I'm doing is not working. I have to figure something out. I have to figure something out because what we're doing is not working. I really have to think about it. he says. What I'm saying, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to work on is not resonating. And as he goes through there and keeps saying things like, we have to figure it out. I don't know what we can do. It's just not working. I'm not sure. I don't know what to do. And even like later, I asked him a question, and I'll let you hear the question, and then you can hear what Jeff Capel said in response to this. Here's my question and Capel's answer.
Is it a matter of what you're teaching or how you're teaching it? Is it both?
Great question. I've asked that question to myself a lot. Chris, I wish I had the answer for you. I do. I don't have the answer right now, but I will before Saturday.
Well, he says he'll have an answer before Saturday, so that's good. But, I mean, you get the common theme here. It's not totally to the point of throwing his hands up and saying, I just don't know. I can't figure it out. I'm out of answers. Because he says, I'll have it figured out before Saturday. But, I've always felt most coaches always have something that they're working on, something they're tweaking, something they're going to change, something they're going to do different. They always have different ideas popping up in their head. And I think it's like, I mean, coaches at any level, like you're always thinking of like, what if we do this and what if we do that? Like constantly. I don't think they can turn it off. And where you really get into trouble and where things totally do slip away for any coach in any job is where they get to the point where they kind of say, I don't know what else we can do here. I don't know what else to do. And Jeff Capel's comments last night are bordering on, I don't know what else to do. And that's worrisome. That's worrisome. Because look, this team, like their talent level is what it is. And like we were all fairly down on this team prior to the season. And I think the reason why is because we didn't know, who was going to score on this team, how good would they be. It didn't seem like it was a very high-end, a team loaded with high-end talent. They were going to have to win by grinding it out and playing tough defense and dragging teams down to the mud and, being physical and winning that way. And I mean, okay, it's probably not how I would build a team, but okay, I guess I get it. But the problem is, if you're going to play like that, if you're going to have a team like that, you have to coach the hell out of them. Like they have to be an overly coached team. Like this, I hesitate to go like as far as like fans often do. Oh, he just rolls the ball out on the court, just lets it. But like sometimes it sort of feels like that. Sometimes you don't really see much system at all. Sometimes you don't see much method at all to it. And I don't think that's entirely the case. I think sometimes that's the approach. I don't think it's always the approach for Jeff Capel. I think it probably gets. I mean, we have our guy Steven Gertz does the film breakdowns. He breaks down what Pitt is trying to do. That there is a system in play, or being used, at least attempting to be used. But I think when you have a team like this year's team that is not that talented, that doesn't have great shooters, that doesn't have an obvious offensive weapon. And I mean, as evidenced by the fact that their obvious offensive weapon is Cam freaking Corrin, like that's your obvious offensive weapon. If that's the best you've got, then you need to run great sets. And I'm not going to sit back and long for the days of Jamie Dixon and all of that. But he knew and he understood with teams that were limited in terms of offensive ability. Like that high-end offensive ability, you've got to run great stuff, and they've got to execute it to perfection in order to get the shots and the looks that your guys can make with consistency. And then they have to defend like crazy at the other end. And this team does neither. This team doesn't do either one very well. They don't run a very crisp set offense in the half court, and they don't defend very well at all. And like, again, Cruz Davis, really good player. Like he's going to blow by a lot of guys. Last night, he blew by everyone. Nobody on that team could defend him. And no matter what they did, no matter what Jeff Capel tried, it didn't work. There was a point in the first half where they tried to start doubling him. You know what happened then? Hofstra got 3 consecutive post baskets from the same guy, Victory Onuwatu, or I apologize, Victory, for messing up your last name. 3 consecutive possessions ended with him scoring in the post because they were doubling with Cam Corrin. And when they readjusted and tried to okay, well, we got to, we want to make sure we defend Cruz Davis, but we can't leave the post completely abandoned. You know what happened then? Davis drained a 3. There was no answer. Hofstra had an answer for everything Pitt tried to do. They had an answer for what Pitt wanted to do from the start, and when Pitt adjusted, Hofstra was already 2 steps ahead of them, and they took advantage, and they cashed it in every time. They got outplayed, they got outcoached, they got out everything. Again. And if you're sitting there after the game and you're telling me, I don't know what to do now, I'm running out of answers, that's concerning. That's concerning. I think a lot of this season is going to be spent contemplating the end. I think a lot of us on the outside are going to sit around talking about every game, talking about this program and where it's headed and where it might be at the end of the season and what it might look like in April. And I try not to get too caught up in that. This has always been my thing to you deal with the overall picture of the program at the end of the season when you've got a full body of work to consider, a new season to consider, and try not to get too caught up in every game rendering judgments on the coach or every possession or whatever it might be. And I mean, I apply that to football, to basketball. It probably gets annoying for people on the website that I'm not, I don't tend to be quite as reactive as they are, and reactionary, I guess you would say. But this is what we're going to go through this season. And, particularly when you see results like this, where they're getting their butts kicked by Hofstra. And I'm not really sure we can avoid that. I think that conversation is just going to keep happening. And if Jeff Capel's response is to not really know what to do next, to sort of feel like, sort of give the impression he's throwing his hands up, I mean, it's not a good sign. It's not a good sign. All right, we'll talk about the Military Bowl tomorrow. We'll get more into that conversation, talk about East Carolina and the Military Bowl and whether it was a good bowl or a bad bowl or whatever it might be. And then, of course, we'll keep rolling through with continuing coverage from signing day, coverage getting ready for Pitt football playing East Carolina, coverage getting ready for Pitt basketball playing Villanova next week, or next Saturday, or on Saturday, I should say, in Philadelphia. So a lot to look forward to there, a lot to talk about. Whatever happens, as always, on the court, on the field, off the court, off the field, wherever it is, we're going to keep talking about it right here. So make sure you like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Maybe I'll even get some basketball photos up there if we're going to keep talking basketball. But like I said, tomorrow we'll talk about the Military Bowl. So my photo slideshow gets another day. Love it. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. I hope you've had a great weekend. Enjoy your Monday. Hope your week gets off to a great start. Like and subscribe. We'll talk to you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.